Over the course of the 8 years since Freedom Alternative has been around, one of the things that was constantly promoted and discussed here was the idea of an intermarium. It just so happened that a few months after I started discussing this on the channel, a modern-day political incarnation of this appeared, called the Three Seas Initiative, which convened for the first time in 2016 in Dubrovnik, Croatia. Yours truly was one of the few voices that insisted that this is far more important than the German-influenced media in Europe would have you believe, and now, after attending myself at the 8th edition of the summit, I have to say things went my way a lot more often than not. For instance, as late as 2019, the chiefs of diplomacy insisted that Three Seas is no more than an infrastructure regional project inside the European Union, and it has nothing to do with geopolitics, an aspect stressed at the 2019 summit, to which I also attended, and reiterated at the 2020 summit. A few days ago, in Bucharest, the Three Seas Initiative was almost entirely about the geopolitics of infrastructure, as Moldova's application to become the second associated state was being approved. Skeptics were saying in 2018 that Germany will overtake the whole thing and it will be just another vehicle for German imperialism. Since then, Germany's application has been rejected, and in 2023 it was perhaps Mr. Scholz's presence that was the quietest, as nobody was really interested in hearing the opinion of Germany on really anything at this point. So there are good news, but this year we can't entirely blame the media for not covering them extensively, the reason being the low-quality organizing by the Romanian presidential administration, in stark contrast with the 2018 summit, which was also organized by Romania, which was the best by far. So what happened in Bucharest at the Three Seas Initiative summit, and where is this heading? Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, so as one of the accredited journos for this, I get to use the official footage, which I will do because you don't really need to see my face all the time. Now, this privilege was available to me in 2018 and 2019 as well, the previous times I was an accredited journo for this event, but in the previous two instances I didn't have to use the footage from the official broadcast because us, the press plebs on site, had multiple opportunities to gather our own footage. Opportunities which of course I used, but last week that didn't happen. And it's one of the many reasons for which the coverage from the Three Seas Initiative Summit was so bleak. I mean, I love bashing the mainstream media, but last week I was with the mainstream media, and unlike 2018 or 2019, I can't honestly just call them all stupid and uninformed and call it a day. It wasn't entirely their fault. But in addition to the terrible treatment that the administration subjected the media to, there was also the scandal of a drone debris that had fallen on the territory of Romania following a Russian attack on the Ukrainian border towns of Izmail, Reni and Chilia. The scandal wasn't so much that some debris had fallen in the middle of nowhere, but rather that the Romanian officials denied this having happened for over 24 hours, apparently for no reason, since nobody gained anything from the prolonged denial, and they all looked like a bunch of fools. Now, not that they're not fools, mind you, but one would expect their sense of political preservation to kick in. Anyway, long story short, the media here was far more concerned with that during the summit, since that story brought a bigger audience and since the administration shielded the officials from us. At least pursuing the drone story gave the journos something to talk about. Now, I'll come back to this aspect towards the end of the video. So, what did happen in Bucharest? Well, for starters, the Three Seas Initiative is now the Four Seas Initiative since Greece was admitted as the 13th member state. The Greek media offered a much wider coverage of the summit than the Romanian one, which is understandable given that for Greece this is a big deal. You might remember from a decade ago that Greece was a basket case economically. Well, things haven't improved that much since then, and the country is in great need of infrastructure investment. Also, the far-left Syriza administration left a mess in the geopolitics of the country, a mess which the current Mitsotakis administration is trying to slowly clean up, with some successes as well. From an Intermarium perspective, the biggest worry we have is the fact that the Piraeus port continues to cough in ideograms being owned and operated by the China COSCO Shipping Corporation. Of course, the biggest advantage is the access to the Aegean Sea, and if we connect Greece's railways with the ones in Bulgaria and then further north all the way till the Baltic Sea, this would solve multiple logistical problems that currently generate a lot of headaches in this part of the world, and this includes the currently famous Ukrainian grain exports. But of course, the main reason Greece's bid for membership was approved was because of energy. Slowly, under the radar, the trilateral energy cooperation between Greece, Cyprus and Israel has been developing. If you remember, we did discuss this in 2018 during my trip to Israel. After all, that's why you come to Freedom Alternative, for news years before it's news. So, long story short, Greece joining the initiative is very good for Greece and, at least on the shorter run, quite good for the Intermarium as well. I will, however, raise the worry over the longer term. The Greek electorate has a tendency to bring in weirdos in power every once in a while. A decade ago, the media focused incessantly on the fascist party Golden Dawn, which, although repelling, was never in power. But not enough ink has been wasted to write in English about the mess left by the years in power of the coalition of the radical left. Next on the agenda is the approval of Moldova's bid to become the second associated state after last year's approval of Ukraine as the first associated state of the Three Seas Initiative. These two were, of course, pushed by Russia's escalation in Ukraine, but tragedy notwithstanding, this also signals a departure from the initial purported EU-centric or EU-focused approach, a departure which pleases people like me immensely, as I regard the Intermarium as a region subjected not just to the Russian problem, but also to the German problem, and thus a region that should pursue its own interests with external partners that are not from continental West Europe or China. And speaking of external partners, the 2023 summit also featured the participation of Japan, not just to the business forum, but also to the political meeting, marking a deepening interest by Japan into this region. Moreover, the Japanese delegation left Bucharest for Kyiv after the summit, where they also discussed security guarantees. Now, such thing was effectively unimaginable 5 years ago. And this is one of the many reasons why I'm so angry with the coverage of this summit being made worse by the organizers. Because a lot of this is possible indeed thanks to Romania and Poland's idea to create a fund and a business forum at the Bucharest summit in 2018. And speaking of the fund, that one spent at least 117 billion euros from its inception until 2021, according to the Polish Prime Minister at the joint press conference on September the 6th. According to unrefined data that goes through June of 2023, the Three Seas Initiative Fund doled out between 180 and 190 billion euros since its inception in direct and indirect infrastructure spending. Now, that may not sound like a lot of money, but that's the GDP of Greece, a bit more than the GDP of Hungary, and almost twice the GDP of Slovakia. For this region, the Polish-Romanian-led effort to revive north-south infrastructure spending is indeed quite spectacular. And unofficially, it says that up to 400 billion euros are to be spent on various infrastructure projects by 2025. And the results are visible, albeit rarely advertised in our constantly negativistic German-influenced media. The president of Poland was thrilled with the increased connections of his country to Slovakia, and I can confirm some of that. For the first time since I've been riding the train from Budapest to Warsaw, it was in November 2022 when we could finally observe some improvement in the speed and some work being conducted to the railways on the territory of Slovakia. Long overdue, and indeed couldn't have been done without this initiative, really. In Hungary, the only construction work on infrastructure that hasn't been halted by EU sanctions is the one on 3SI projects, an aspect about which Hungary doesn't utter a word lately. In fact, Hungary was the second most quiet delegation at the summit, after Germany. Which is odd, given that the initiative's energy projects, some of them well underway to implementation, are quite explicitly made to help Hungary no longer be dependent on Russia. At the end of this week, I shall head to videotape another episode of the occasional podcast with Miguel, and the trip will take 90 minutes less than it used to just a few years ago, thanks to the work on the Rail to Sea project, which ultimately aims to connect Gdansk to Constanța. I guess what I'm saying is that, contrary to most skeptics, the initiative did successfully move from political talk and paper pushing to real-life, tangible results. And then there's the less flattening news. With the ending of Miloš Zeman's term in Czechia, the country's interest in the initiative continued to drop like a stone. The election of General Petr Pavel as president at the end of January 2023 was expected to bring much greater coordination of foreign policy between the head of state and the government, which should have positively translated into the actions of the Czech authorities towards the Three Seas initiative format, but the latter didn't quite happen. Then there's the multitude of really cheap and easy projects that would cure a lot of logistical headaches in our region that haven't even begun, such as a second track between Sopron and Győr in Hungary, which is under 100 kilometers long, and it would multiply the uses of the intermodal terminal in Sopron and connect Hungary's western industrial hub with the rest of the region, and with Austria too. Or the second railway track between Koper and Divača in Slovenia. While the construction has seen some substantial progress, the pace remains shockingly slow, which helps nobody. But instead of discussing these in public, the politicians, helped by a very sensationalistic media, spoke a lot about Ukrainian grain, as if we're all supposed to be born this morning or something. I mean, out of the grand total of just 4 questions allowed at the press conference, 2 of them were about the export of Ukrainian grain, and in one of them the journalist failed to put Andrzej Duda on the spot for it, allowing Iohannis to pull everyone out of the dilemma by passing the buck to the Lithuanian president, who of course had no idea what everyone was talking about, because Ukrainian grains are, understandably so, simply not an issue for Lithuania. And while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and say it. Poland's dance on this topic is really simple. Elections are coming. And Prawo i Sprawiedliwość has a strong agrarian and farmer base. Electoral base, I mean. So President Zelensky can threaten with arbitration until he's blue in the face, because Poland will not cancel its ban until at least a week after the parliamentary election. So that's towards the end of October. Until then, Morawiecki and friends have to play nice with the voters, especially considering that Prawo i Sprawiedliwość risks being outflanked not by Tusk and his leftists, but by Konfederacja, whose geopolitical outlook is disliked by everyone. To placate both of these challenges, the ruling coalition in Poland threw a referendum on migration into the mix and this ban on Ukrainian grain exports. Will this work? Maybe. Maybe not, but one thing is certain: wasting precious time on a geopolitical summit over an issue everyone with a brain knows it's related to domestic politics is a dick move. And on this, both the politicians and the sensationalistic media are to blame. Ultimately, the 2023 Bucharest Three Seas Initiative Summit featured a few firsts. The first expansion, with Greece joining as a full member, the first confirmation that the Three Seas Initiative is serious about taking its own region seriously above the concerned trolling from Germany, the first serious confirmation that it can get things done, with quite a few projects already finalized and surprisingly in a timely fashion, but also the first summit that was truly opaque to the public in ways that I haven't seen before, and I followed all of them and attended half of them in person. So the initiative is at a crossroad in the same way it was in 2018, and coincidentally both moments are related to a summit in Bucharest. In 2018, the summit really kicked the whole thing into full gear with the creation of the Business Forum, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, deepening cooperation with the United States, an aspect maintained by the Biden administration despite what many had feared back in 2020. In 2018, we had unfettered access to officials, and thanks to that, we were able to deliver news that needed years to filter through and reach the mainstream media. The 2023 summit reported some relatively impressive results, but also featured no access to officialdom. You see, my colleague from the Romanian podcast was rejected for accreditation for reasons that are still not entirely clear to me. When that happened, I was very mad, furious. First, because I knew our coverage would suffer, and secondly, because I had less than 15 hours to find a replacement, and thirdly, because the whole process, frankly, looked amateurish. But by the time I had reached the summit, I envied my rejected colleague. At least he got to sleep till later in that day and then meet with some potential collaborators for our network. He definitely got the better deal out of the trip to Bucharest. Meanwhile, I had to suffer among mainstream media journos who were, just like me, annoyed and bored by the opaqueness of this summit. Our media center was set up as far away as possible from the officialdom. Meanwhile, in 2018, we were right next to them, literally next door. We were told we could meet them as they arrive, but this is the position we were given: 20 to 25 meters away from their arriving cars. Gee, thanks. How's that gonna help with the effort to do the job I was sent there? Namely, to get information. And then there's the part where the organizing of the Business Forum was moved from the presidential administration to the government, which is unheard of in previous summits. The government made sure things were as confusing as possible. The accreditation procedure changed several times, in addition to first being informed twice that there will be no press credentials issued at all, and then the timeline shifted a few times. Sure, it also didn't help that the timeline shift made it impossible for me to apply because it overlapped with my trip to Ukraine in late August. Still, I'm glad I took the trip through instead of waiting for the Romanian government to announce a decision in their organizing, because in the end, they treated the media even worse than the presidency had done. Basically, they invited the journalists to all stay crammed in a room and look at big screens. Gee, that was helpful too. I simply cannot stress enough just how badly organized this was from the media's perspective. That's why I can't fully blame the media for its lame or non-existent coverage. Unless you were a geopolitical junkie, you couldn't actually make a report on this based on what you were given on site. Because nearly all of the media representatives there were employees who were just given a task to deliver a story, any story, from there to justify the expense. That's it. And since most field journals are poorly paid, this means most of them aren't geopolitical junkies, and even if they were, they had no incentive to relentlessly pursue a more detailed analysis. In fact, given the presidential administration's limits on the number of questions allowed for the common press conference, the fate of the reporting was sealed even before the first day of the summit had concluded. Anyway, the next summit is somewhere in April 2024 in Vilnius, Lithuania. Also a first. We already know where it will be 2 years from now. In 2025, Budapest will host this summit. And in a twist of irony, the very poor North-South connections within the Three Seas initiative makes it highly unlikely that I will attend the 2024 summit, though that's an issue to be discussed with the donors. The crossroad in 2018 was this: go forward with investments regardless of the opinions of the European Union, that is to say Germany, and see what happens, or kowtow to the European Union and German concern trolling. Fortunately, under the Romanian and Slovenian presidency, the initiative took the correct path, and that turned out to be highly useful following Russia's escalation in Ukraine. In 2023, the crossroad is this: continue like now with still too much deference awarded to the Европейский Союз, or double down on the regional power bloc agenda. Of course, I can't know, and nobody can know, which way things will go. Leadership style may change in both Romania and Poland by 2025. Croatia has a parliamentary election in the summer of 2024. The current government is supportive of the initiative, but the president is not. Gone are the days of Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, who, as a founding member, invested a lot more political will and capital into this. The current Croatian president, Zoran Milanovic, occasionally coughs in Cyrillic and isn't quite fond of the current direction of the initiative. Then there's the issue of Austria, whom fewer and fewer even like in the first place, but whose leadership may also change in the summer of 2024. I presume this is why the Lithuanian presidency set up the summit date in April, so as to avoid the summit being dragged through at least 2 election campaigns. But the answer to all of these will become apparent by the Budapest summit in 2025, to which, if health and money allows, I will attend. The point that I'm trying to make here is that in less than 2 years, the Three Seas initiative could be relegated to the status of a cute platform that got a few things done, or it could be the vehicle through which the Intermarium region finally forwards its interests, including and especially when they collide with the interests of the German problem. My preference is, of course, for the latter, but this will not be up to me. It will be on the electorate in Croatia, Austria, Poland, and Romania, primarily, as all 4 are due to hold elections in 2024. So far, the Three Seas initiative as a political project has been extremely lucky. So many things could have gone wrong, but didn't. Let's just hope this luck holds in the next 18 months or so, because we're gonna need it. And hopefully, I'll still be there to report how things are going. Yeah, I guess that will be pretty much it. So, yeah, with that, I'll stop here. Many thanks to the donor circle who made this possible. Don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.